Hello and welcome to the Alpha Software Demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Product here at Alpha Software. And today I have a presentation for you based on questions that were asked at our last webinar. So I can't wait to get into those. And just as a reminder, you can ask questions at any time by typing them into the chat window of the GoToWebinar control panel, or you can send them to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com. I will take a look at them live on the air, and if I can answer them live on the air, I will, or if not, I'll do like I did this week and show them to you the next week. So do keep those questions coming in. All right, so before I go any further, I just want to make sure that you can see my screen and you can see my mouse moving around, just doing a quick AV check, making sure I'm not just speaking to the ether. Okay, great, thanks very much. So let's get going. So the first thing we're going to talk about has to do with uploading of files, or specifically saving files to disk. And we're going to show a few ways to do that. So here is the question that was asked last week. They said, listen, I was in the storage connection string builder. That's the interface in Alpha Anywhere that you use to build, well, storage connection strings. So you can, for example, if you're saving data, let's say you're saving files along with database information, you're saving JPEGs or something like that. Oftentimes, you don't necessarily want to put them on the same hard drive as the servers. You want to put them some other place, maybe one that's more cost effective or one that's faster. So you might use a service like Amazon S3 or Azure or Dropbox or something like that. And with those, we often have you build what's called a storage connection string. So when you start using one of our builders or some of the Xbasic functions that deal with file manipulation, you use that storage connection string, and that has all of the information about how to log into the provider and all of that. But the question we got last week wasn't about those. It was about this one option called disk. What is that disk provider? Why is it a storage connection string? So I will talk about that right now. If you select disk, then you will in fact be saving stuff onto a local disk or a network disk. But sometimes that's what you want to do. Sometimes you want to keep the data, maybe you have compliance reasons that you might need to keep that data secured and it's going to be on premise at all times. Or maybe you've got a great like a NAS array or a RAID array of storage that you already have that you prefer to use rather than basically using stuff at Amazon S3. So disk is one of the options. When you select disk, you'll see this thing here called region. It's grayed out. You can ignore that. Use test storage. You can ignore that too. But you'll say username and password. And that seems kind of weird when you're specifying a disk location, but it isn't really, because you might not, as I have it here, be storing to a hard drive that's connected directly to the server. You might instead be connected to a network drive. So you've got a LAN, you've got multiple machines on it, and you're going to be connecting basically to a different computer on that LAN. And to do that, you might need to use your username and password as authorization to show that you have access to that machine. Now, when it comes to filling in username and password, these are Windows authentication things. Often it's going to be the name of the computer and then / your username followed by your password. But this can vary depending on how your local area network is set up. So what I found is a really good way when I'm looking for the proper way to do a username and password in Windows, and there's lots of different ways of doing that when I need to make a connection, is to ask Copilot. So, Copilot's the Microsoft chat engine, and it does a terrific job of saying, hey, look, here's the configuration. What's the format that I need for username and password? So if you need to fill them out, that's what I would do there. In this case, though, I just put it into a hard drive folder called AA App Storage. And when I click the OK button, I saw that the storage connection string builder said that it was a success. It was able to build that connection string. And that was because, of course, first I went onto my hard drive and I created that AA App Storage folder right on my hard drive. Okay, so now I am armed with a connection string to my disk. What can I do with it? Well, the first thing I thought of doing with it was to do a file upload, right? If I were to upload a file, use the storage connection string, not to push it to S3 or Wasabi, but push it to my local hard disk. Interestingly, storage connection strings typically aren't used. So if I went into help and I went into, I basically did a search in documentation.alphasoftware.com, and I did a search for all of the file upload commands. I just typed in file upload, and you'll see there's lots of different ways of doing a file upload. There's the file upload and download control. There's a file upload action JavaScript script. There are Cordova or PhoneGap Cordova plugins for handling files as well. And there's also the drag and drop upload control. Lots of different ways. But interestingly, when you're using these genies, they typically don't let you use a disk connection string. You can still save it to disk, but they just don't let you use a connection string that's been defined as a disk connection string. That may change in the future, but that's just how it is right now. So for example, when I was setting up this fairly simple file upload, and it asked me where I would like to upload the file, I could either choose Amazon S3 or Wasabi, and this is Amazon S3 indirect, and that's just a cool feature which lets you send data directly to Amazon S3 without going through the Alpha server. It's kind of useful. But in this case, we could just choose server. So when we choose server, we tell it what directory we want to put it in, and we're done. So what I wanted to show you today was a couple of ways that, first of all, the question, of course, is, well, if you can't use the storage connection string builder for doing file uploads, what would you use it for? And the answer is that there are actually quite a few Xbasic, if I can click on the right slide here, storage functions that you can use it with. So if you're writing scripts that are moving data on and off disk or on and off Amazon or Azure or SharePoint or whatever, we have a whole bunch of storage options here. So you'll find them right under storage functions in the documentation. And those can use disk as the option. But often the builders, like the ones you do for file upload, don't do that. All right, that said, I was still interested in file upload because we'd also gotten a question about file uploads. So there are two file upload methods that I wanted to show you today. And I also want to remind you that if you go back to an earlier webinars, the ones on the Alpha test drive, we did some image uploading then, and we did it into a list control. That's a very typical way of handling that sort of thing. But today we're going to be taking a look at two methods. One is the simplest no-code way to set up file upload. And the second is a slightly more advanced, but with some code way of doing drag and drop of multiple files at once. I'm going to show you how to do both of those. And then at the end, I have one more topic I want to get to. But let's start here with no code way for single uploads. And before I go any further, I'm just going to look in the questions box. How do we watch previous webinars? You can find previous webinars on our YouTube channel and just youtube.com. And if you go to do a search for Alpha Software, you will find our channel, and that will be in our, we basically have a playlist that's dedicated directly towards that. I will go and try to find the link for you and paste that in before we leave here today. Okay. So here is the no-code way for doing uploads, and these are for uploading a single file at a time. And the great thing about this is it's no code. It's really simple to set up. I'm going to show you how it works. To make this work, though, there are 4 things that you need. One is that when you're setting up your UX component, that UX component needs to be data bound. If you want to do it the no-code way, there are ways of doing it not data bound, but you want to data bind it. The second thing is you're going to use a file upload download control, which you will find here in other controls. The third thing is you're going to use the file upload action JavaScript, which does all of the heavy lifting for you. And it's very, very cool. I'm going to show this to you. And then the last part is that you have to be able to save the record, because the script itself doesn't permanently commit that record to your hard drive unless the record is saved. So I'm going to just know those 4 things going in, and I'll just take you through it. So imagine you've created a database, a SQLite database like this one, and it's got 3 fields in it: file ID, file name, and description. And we're going to use this like as a file repository. So I gave the table name file repo. And in it, it's got just an integer field for the just for the ID, and then file name and a description. File name is really the only one we're going to be really interested in here today. So then I went and I created a new UX. And when I created the new UX, I went into the data binding section and I clicked on bind the controls on your UX to fields in one or more existing tables. And I selected my connection string and I selected my table file repo. And that's all I did. I didn't do any other binding settings beyond that. Then I went in and added some controls. I added 4 controls. I added the file upload control, which I just showed you in the documentation a second ago, but it's interesting. This is an invisible control, so the user doesn't see it, but it performs an important function of handling the manipulations of the files. And then the other controls I put on were 3 buttons. One for upload file, that kicks off the JavaScript that's necessary to do the file upload. The next one was the submit button, which commits the record. And again, the record has to be committed in order to save the file. And then there was a reset button as well. So I'm going to show you quickly how those go on. When you choose file upload, which you'll find in other controls, or the file upload download control, the properties you'll find here under data binding, you want to check that as updatable. In other words, we want to be able to write to this. And basically what we'll be writing to this is the name of the file that we've uploaded. And then we choose our table alias. So that was the one we set up before, file repo. And then we choose file name as the field name for where we want to place the file name of the file. Pretty simple so far. The next thing we did is we went into upload file. Now upload file, oops, that was data binding. Upload file looks like this. My upload file, there's an action JavaScript for it, and you will find if you type in file to filter down the list, a whole bunch of different ones. Here are the ones for Cordova. There are ones that are user defined, and then this one is just the simple file upload. This is the one we're going to use here today. When you select that, this is where no code, low code is fantastic. It gives you a lot of options that you don't have to code yourself. For example, you can say, what's the maximum file size? And if you exceed that maximum file size, what message should I give to the user based on that? The next thing you can say is, what are the types of extensions? Am I allowed PDFs and JPEGs or PNGs or whatever, or which ones aren't allowed is another one. And then you have control over what the window looks like, where they're selecting the files, what the progress bar looks like. So you have a lot of this stuff. All you have to do is just fill it out. So once that's filled out, you would be good to go, except you have to hook up, this is one thing that I always forget, a submit button. These buttons, by the way, submit and reset, you'd find them here in defined controls. You could just say add controls, say search, and these submit and reset buttons are actually predefined controls that you can just drop in. But the submit button doesn't fully work until you define what's called an onSubmit, until we created a server-side event, which I'll show you here. So this is how you hook up the submit button. When you are in the designer, you're going to go to server-side events, and you're going to choose this event, the after dialog validate event. After dialog validate is the one that fires, is the script that runs once it knows that the user wants to submit the record and everything has been validated and it's ready to go. So here they want you to write a piece of, I guess, Xbasic to send this to commit the record. But you don't really have to do any coding here. Just click on the action scripting button up here. That pops up this window and just choose Save Submitted Data to Tables. When you do that, you're going to see it inserts this piece of code here. So you don't have to remember this or write it down or anything like that. It's just click Action JavaScript, Save Submitted Data to Tables. And at this point, you've done it all. So let's go take a look in real life and see this working. So here I am over here on my Windows machine, and we're going to take a look at my first UX called Upload Simple. So I'm going to double click on that. And it looks just like it did in the PowerPoint. And I'm going to go ahead and do a live preview. By the way, when you're working with file uploads and downloads, you can't do them in working preview. You have to do them in live preview. It'll warn you if you try to do it, but just a note. All right, I already have a server running. Excuse me. Oh, my mouse is is acting weird. Hang on a second. There we go. So when I click OK, we should see my little app. Okay. So let me show you two things before I actually click over here. First thing I'm going to show you is my SQLite database. It is empty. And I'm also going to open up this Explorer window pointing to the AA app storage folder that I created before. You'll notice that it is also empty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click Upload File. And this Select File dialog box appears. And yes, fully customizable. It was back in when you set up the auction JavaScript is where you can set up how this reads, what it looks like, what this icon is, and so on. So let's go ahead and choose a file. I'll choose this one called Doggo. And I'm going to upload it. And then I'm going to submit it. And let's see what's happened. So let's first take a look at Windows Explorer. There it is. There's my picture. It has appeared. It is uploaded now onto my server. And now let's go take a look inside the database. And there in this table, you'll notice doggo.jpg has been saved. So it took almost nothing whatsoever to add a file upload component to or functionality to my application. I just started with a bound UX, bound to like a SQLite table, and then put in the file upload download control, inserted the action JavaScript to make it work, and then of course hooked up the submit button so I could actually submit the record. All right, pretty cool, but this only works for one file at a time. Is there a way to handle multiple files? And even more interestingly, is there a way to do this using drag and drop? Because that's kind of become the standard in applications nowadays. Like if you're in Dropbox and you want to add 3 or 4 files from your desktop, you know, you can just click on them and drag them into the window and have that work. And the answer is yes, you can do that in alpha. It does require some coding, but it doesn't require much coding. So I'm going to take you through that more advanced example right now. But before I do that, I'm going to go see if there are any more questions here. Oh, here's a good question. How do you put in a specific directory you can use an argument in as the directory name? I'm not sure if you can do that in the simple no-code example, but you could definitely do that in the example I'm about to show you. You're going to have enough control that you could say, sometimes I want it in this directory, sometimes I want it in this other directory. I'll show you how that works. So let's take a look at my other UX component. Interestingly, it actually has fewer controls on it. So this is called upload drag drop. And someone asked if I can make these components available for you in the slideshow as well. Yeah, I absolutely can do that. I'll try to make a point when we post the video to give a link to those assets as well. All right, so here we are in my drag and drop. Let's go into controls. My file upload drag and drop example. So what I'm going to do first, let me just clear out that database. We're starting from a clean slate. I'm going to go ahead and delete. Okay. That looks good. And I'm going to go into my directory and delete my picture here. All right. So I'm going to first show you it working, and then I'm going to show you how I got it to work. All right. So we're going to start with it working. Let's go ahead in here, and I'm going to go into live preview again. Fast preview. Nope, I've got a server. All right, so here it's created this area, drag 1 or more files to upload right here in this section. I'm gonna go ahead and grab some files. Doesn't really, I have no idea what these are. These are just junk files that seem to accumulate on my desktop. Oh, here's a link to Carbonite. Here's Git.desktop. Let's see how many of these I've gotten. Looks like I've selected about, no, let's not get picky. Let's choose just these 2. I'm going to drag these 2 up here. I'm going to let go. And I have a your file, GitHub desktop link is an application or octet stream file that is 2425 bytes in size. So there's that first file. And the second file, your always up.lnk, is an application octet stream that is 1083 bytes in size. And so I programmed it basically to do all that, to show that message in that format. Now, let's make sure, though, that it actually worked. Let's go take a look at the database. Let's go back to here. Oops. Now we're going to do a refresh. And you'll see file name, GitHub desktop.lnk, and alwaysup.lnk. So it did work. And if I take a look in Explorer, there they are. So I was able to do multiples. So how did we do this one? Well, this one's interesting. This drag drop file upload, which you can just add as a regular control here, just by saying add controls, has the following properties. It's got two things in particular. One is the drag and drop area properties, and this defines just kind of what it looks like. Like, what does it say? It says drag one or more files here. You could say whether or not you're allowing them to do click and drag, or whether you're forcing them to click a button in order to open up an Explorer window to do it. You could set the class name, the style. You could do all kinds of stuff. You want to have some background image in there, you could do that. So that's all controlled here. But how it actually functions is controlled here under File Upload Properties. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And then you'll see under File Upload Properties, you have a couple of options. So one is Upload Target. If I clicked on that, you'll see that I have that option, like I showed you before, of either Amazon S3, either direct or indirect, or server, and I've chosen server. And it'll tell you here, look, if you decided to go with server, you're going to need to specify the name of an Xbasic function that'll get called after each file has been uploaded. So in other words, the way this component works is when I drag those files on, it's going to run an Xbasic function for each one of those files. So to do that, you need to define that Xbasic function. So over here in that smart field, you click on it and you'll give it a name. I called mine process uploads. And you've probably seen dialog boxes like this before in Alpha. This is kind of a familiar way to let you set up your functions. But the first thing I'm going to do, or after I've typed in my function name, I'm going to click on Show Function Prototype. And this is great. It's worth familiarizing yourself with this code. It's not a ton of code. And it shows you what your Xbasic function is going to be allowed to have access to. So it gets hold of the source file name. It gets hold of the content type, the encoding, the size, the local file name. That's where it's been temporarily placed on your hard drive until you save it to a permanent location. So all that stuff is here. And it gives you some examples of how you can define the script. I found this one was pretty useful over here. And so what you can do is you can just copy this to the clipboard and you can open up your Xbasic function declarations and just paste it in, which I've done here, and I've made some modifications. All right, so who's ready to roll up their sleeves and take a look at some Xbasic code? I thought you would be. All right, let's scroll down here. And let's start taking a look at this one. So just for kicks, I decided to put in a message because the functionality behind the file upload control is silent. So when you upload controls, it just does it. It doesn't really, the user doesn't know that anything's happened unless you tell them something's happened in your response. So to do that, I put together a string which said your file, and then I gave the name of the file, which I got back, was returned to me. Is a, and then I put in content type, file that is, and then I put in the size, and so on to build up the message. And then I put up a JavaScript alert, which basically just shows them that message. Hey, which I showed you a moment ago. Okay, so the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to take that file, which is now saved in a temporary directory and will be deleted when the session ends, and I'm going to put it in its permanent location. And its permanent location is going to be here, AA app storage. Now here, because we just got a question, can I put this into a different directory? Yeah, you sure could. In Xbasic, it would be pretty easy to derive the name of the directory you want to put it in. Maybe you've got a user ID or something like that you have access to, and that user ID has got its own subdirectory under it. So there's a lot of stuff that you could do that way. Maybe it's based on dates. Maybe you've got like a January. Whoop, hang on a second. Whoop. A little bit of spam phone calling. Get rid of that. Okay, so that goes in there. So once we've set up where it wants to go and what the file name will be, which is typically the source file name, but you can change that. The only thing we're really doing here is running this thing here, file copy. And file copy just says take it from one place and put it in the other place. Take it from the local storage version of it and put it to where we want to keep it permanently. That's all that it takes. Just this one, well, actually, I guess just these 3 lines here, excluding the comments, is all it takes to write that file to the hard drive. But we don't just want to write it to the hard drive. We also want to set a database record and indicate in the database, that that file is there and what its file name is, so that we keep track of it. So here I added another piece of code, and that code just uses the basically does a SQL insert into my database to indicate what the file name was. Now, I don't love writing lots of code. I don't have to, because this is Alpha Anywhere. And the way I wrote that code was I decided to right click here, and if you choose Genies and you choose the Xbasic SQL Actions Code Generator, it's kind of a mouthful, it will write all the code for you. So I'm going to click on that. It says, okay, what do you want to do? I want to insert a record into my database. It's like, okay, that's great. What database? So here's my connection string, testcon. Okay, what table? I'm going to choose the file repo table. And then last but not least, what field do you want to write this to? Oops. And I'm going to choose the file name field. Okay. And what do you want to insert for the field value? I don't know yet, but this is where I put in like my value or something like that. And I type in something obvious. I'll show you why. Because when it generates that code, and I find my value, I know this is the one that I'm going to replace with e.filename, because that's what I want to write to the database. So at that point, once I click OK, which I'm not going to do because I've already done, but if I click OK, it fills in the rest of it for you. And that's really all there was to it. Now, one last thing that I want to point out. I don't have any error checking in this component. I'll make this component available to you, but I don't have any error checking to see whether or not the file exists already. So in this case, it might just overwrite it. But maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I have lots of people submitting into the same directory, and maybe they're submitting, I don't know, like some application form, and everyone named their same thing application form. So you want to have different varieties of it. What you can often do, you can number them, you could do them based on a date, but you could also just use the GUID create to create a GUID for it, stick that onto the file name, and then you'll be guaranteed to always have a unique file name. So that's just a way of handling that. So that is that for defining drag and drop file uploads. So I don't know if there are any questions on that. Let me take a look. Exit batch, saving, yep, cancel, cancel. And if there aren't, okay. Nope, but the only question is how long will it take before I post this to YouTube? So you'll just go ahead and usually we do it within a day or two. If you ever find that we're slow, send an email to guides@alphasoftware.com and we'll make sure that it gets posted faster or give you access to the raw files here. So, all right, so the last thing I want to do is take a look at another question. And the question that we had last week was, I have a list control, but I want to show the data in a free-form layout using a view box or form view control, either way. So I decided we'd go with view box this time. Keep in mind, a list control in a UX does have the ability to do a free form layout, but maybe you've decided you don't want to do it that way. You want to use the view box. So you're going to be using the view box for the detail section of the list control. So in other words, when I select a particular item in the list, I want to see all the fields or some selection of the fields pasted into a view box. Well, it turns out we already had an example of this. It's right here. When you create a new UX component from a template, using a view box to show details for a list record is one of the examples. And I'm going to show it to you right now because it's pretty cool. And it has one little thing that you need to know, which is why it's good that there's an example for you. One thing that may not have been intuitive. All right, let me go ahead and close that. And oh, there, I can just start from scratch here. New UX component, UX. And we're going to start with a template. And I'm going to say view box, using a view box to show details for a list record. So I'm going to click OK on that. And close. So let's go ahead. Well, let's give this a name, by the way. We'll call this view box detail. So this is a pretty simple UX component. It just has a list control and a view box control. Let's take a look at it in working preview. Oh, it's using an older style, so it's just giving me this warning. No big deal. Now, when I select a particular item in this list, you will see something pops up over here on the right. And so this is the detail view. See the on select event in list. It tells you where to look. And here it's showing you the name, Henry Rhodes, New York, New York. So it's taken some of the data and it's placed it here in this free form area. So let's take a look at two things. First, let's take a look at the view box. Okay. And look how simple that is. This is the detail row, and then wherever we had fields, we set them up there. Okay. So the data source, viewbox type is data, it's going to be static JSON. So as far as this viewbox is concerned, it doesn't know that it's connected to any data source. So it's going to be up to our list control to actually update this viewbox. So how does it do that? Well, I'll show you. First, let me close this. Let's see that saving. Yep. All right, so we're going to go into the list control and we're going to go into list properties, and we're going to scroll down to where the events are, the actions are. And the on select action. In other words, when I click on a row, what's going to happen? So I'm going to go ahead and click on select here. And it has just this tiny bit of JavaScript. First, it sets a pointer to the data that you're currently on. Then it uses gets the object pointer to your view box, and then it populates the view box with the data from that. So that's the whole magic right here that makes that work. So you can now use view boxes to lay out the data. So the advantage, of course, of using a view box to lay out the data is you have a great deal of flexibility as to how it's going to appear. So if I open this up, we've got the whole HTML, we've got the whole freeform editor. Here we have Genies for setting things up. You could go crazy here. You're putting in anything you want, graphics and or whatever. So it's nice to have like a way of just basically just doing pure HTML to lay out your data. Viewbox Builder is great for that. And a list control can populate the fields that are going to appear in that. All right, so that's that for today. Calculated fields, okay. Okay, great. I've got a question for next time, and it has to do with calculated fields, and we will get that. Are there any other questions? And it doesn't look like it. If there aren't, go ahead and send them into guides. And thanks very much for joining us today. Appreciate it. If you do have questions, again, guides@alphasoftware.com, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Alpha Software demo and Q&A webcast. Take care. Bye-bye.